All right, guys, thank you for that one. We're going top story take number 2 with Rachel Premack, and we're here to discuss her commentary on OpenAI and why driver perspective is something that's absolutely invaluable when it comes to having this both artificial intelligence and autonomous trucking conversation. Rachel, thanks for being here, and let's dig into this, right? We often hear a lot about the AI space, but not a lot about how this will actually affect those real drivers in the seats from the mouth of the driver. We get a lot of speculation from people who have no direct relation to trucking other than being in the industry. Talk to us about why driver perspective from the mouth of the driver is so important.
Definitely. So I think one of the big reasons why it would make sense to have an actual truck driver, let's say on the OpenAI board, would be because drivers, and I think just generally smart, informed people in the industry who've been following what's going on closely, they understand that technology is a really useful tool for solving certain issues, but it's not everything. I think one really good example of this is the ELD mandate. That was something that was supposed to decrease how many hours a driver is working and sort of constrain those hours into a set time period to prevent fatigue and overwork. But it didn't solve the actual problem that likely drives fatigue and overwork, and that's the structure through which drivers are paid, which is a per mile structure, as obviously anyone watching this show would understand. So I think kind of just taking a step back and looking at what the real issues are in trucking and the real issues are in just society in general, I think drivers have a really good perspective on how to solve these issues in a more nuanced and accurate way.
I feel like there could be a Napoleon quote. If you ever wanted to learn something, ask a private. And looking at these boards and the makeup of these boards, is there a real concern, even with the OpenAI drama and others, that there's a lot of disconnect just because you happen to be on a philanthropic board or a money-making board and given your positioning? What kind of situation, especially for drivers, starting at maybe a driver, what do you think in terms of the type of drivers or maybe the type of individuals we should be trying to get to provide more, at least from a functional perspective, a functional diversity in terms of job role and experience?
I mean, I think just any driver would be a win. I think, the likelihood of, I think anyone in the trucking industry, any sort of driver would be a really big win to have on the OpenAI board. At this point, it's basically just corporate types that have staffed the board. Previously, there were academics, people who could kind of take more of a big picture perspective, people who are a bit more concerned about the safety mission of OpenAI, which is to develop artificial intelligence, but do so in a way that benefits humanity, not just a way that could make a lot of money for a select group of people. And considering the current staff of OpenAI, board members of OpenAI are, we got Larry Summers, we've got the former co-CEO of Salesforce. I think these are not people who would be severely disadvantaged in any sort of way, to lose their biweekly paycheck. I think having someone such as a driver on the board who actually does have some sort of financial stake and livelihood stake in the development of artificial intelligence would be incredibly beneficial.
I think part of the broader conversation that this sparks up, Rachel, is how technology comes in to disrupt industries that are maybe traditionally a little bit more manual, traditionally a little bit more blue collar, thinking about like autonomous robots coming in to disrupt like a factory that's like a piece by piece line factory, right? And a lot of times this technology is developed and implemented with good intentions and with a lot of people who are on that developing side thinking about the upsides, the positives, and what this means as far as an efficiency perspective, a money-making perspective, whatever you have it. But they don't often think about the downsides and think about how it will affect that very bottom tier entry-level worker who, as you mentioned, relies on that biweekly paycheck. Is that the type of perspective that we're looking to add when we talk about finding these driver stories and getting them into voices of power? Maybe not necessarily somebody who is looking to move up out of the ranks of their standard blue-collar trucking job, but just someone who's looking to make their voice truly heard and understood from that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of drivers are really keen on sharing their perspective and shaping how these technologies are developed because I think it's drivers, but it's also just regular office workers as well are under a lot of risk and a lot of threat from these sort of technologies. We've already seen we've seen lawyers and programmers and financial analysts all kind of struggle with the rollout of ChatGPT, which pretty crazy to think it's been around for almost a year at this point. But already, even just office jobs are at risk for sort of some of these new technologies. So I think just in general, including people who are not, billionaires would be ideal, and just people who need to work essentially, which is most Americans, but we don't really see people who need to work on this board at this point.
Board seats beget more board seats, it feels like. Looking forward, let's say my driver, or if I'm a driver, I get turned down for the OpenAI board. What do I want to do? Do I need to make my own trucker GPT, or do I just need to start from scratch? Because it does look like there have been concerns that OpenAI, with the corporate and the philanthropic effort, that they may have neutered themselves in terms of its abilities and capabilities. Should truckers just get in there and make their own AI or LLM?
I have no idea, because I think it's very, very challenging to make this sort of technology. At OpenAI right now, we've got 600 brilliant people, full-time employees doing this. I'm sure they're all highly credentialed with very brilliant types of people. So I don't know if I can really recommend any individual driver, any individual person to strike out on their own. But yeah, I do absolutely agree with you that the nonprofit, safety mission of OpenAI is kind of shifted into something else at this point, or appears to be, kind of shifting away from that.
Thomas, if we had the answer to that question, I think that neither of us would be standing right here, right now, talking about this.
We'd be on a board.
Exactly. So, Rachel, next steps, obviously, this includes that diversity and making just boards in general, I think, more accessible to folks who maybe don't have that 8 pages long resume of corporate experience, because people with other perspectives is just as valuable. Is this type of diversity conversation one that we need to also have as well? Is looking at people's education and credential diversity and making sure that is valued?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because when you look at a country like Germany, they the way that their boards are often structured is that they do require, or they do have, union representation, whether that be someone actually from the union or someone who is an employee, but more likely an employee of that company that is a union member. That's just kind of a standard practice in Germany among unionized companies, that there is some regular worker that is on the board. And I think it's something that makes sense that you would have sort of this more worker input, because a lot of the issues you see at a company, the people who see it first are probably, at McDonald's is probably the workers, the cashiers and the kitchen staff themselves, or at a rail company, the rail carrier, like where issues are first spotted are definitely on those front lines, conductors, engineers, and so on. So having more worker input isn't just, kind of like a feel-good thing. I feel like it's also a really smart business decision, because you can actually include and hear from people who are seeing all these issues as they bubble up, as they trickle up, and I think they could probably catch major issues months or years before, the corporate leadership actually comes to understand them.
Speaking truth to power via truckers. Rachel, love the content as well. Looking forward to it. Folks want to check out Modes or the newsletter. What's the best way to find out?
Yeah, that's at freightwaves.com/modes, or you can just go on the Freightwaves website or check out my Twitter at rrpre.com or at rrpre.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Rachel. We are out of time, but speaking of more time, we're going to toss it over to Kaylee Nix for our look at some top stories.